This is a call to order, the May 22nd, 2019 mid-month meeting of the Ducktown Council. I have just a few opening comments I'd like to make before we start the regular agenda. First of all, I'd like to welcome Attorney Andrew Hull, sitting in for Robert Hobbs today. Thank you, Andrew. I'd also like to introduce a new intern we have for this year. Can you hear me out there? Sorry about that. We have a new intern that's joined us today, going to be here for the summer. That's Maddie Lutz, and she's from UNC Wilmington.
Great, welcome.
So, welcome. Also, in the early May, I went to the Board of Commissioners meeting, and the town received an award for one of the best 2018 restored beaches from the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. So I thought I would bring that and show that to the council.
Nice.
And we got this along with Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk and Southern Shores. So it was good recognition for what we had done on our beach.
Very nice.
At this time, I'd like to ask Chris to read a letter that the council got. I think it's a rather nice letter. You can put it over there by him. Thank you.
This letter is from Evelyn and Glenn Wilson, and it says, to whom it may concern, which of course is you all. My wife and I have been coming to Duck, North Carolina for many years and truly enjoy each of our visits. There are times we come with our grown children, but mostly now it is the two of us plus friends. We just wanted to say what a great job your town has done to make visitors have an enjoyable time. We really enjoy the boardwalk that you have, great for walking and shopping. The work you have done on the sidewalks is most enjoyable and is safer. And we'll get to that in a second. I believe the signs that show the driver's speed really help. I see people slow down when they see their speed. We just wanted you to know that due to the improvements you have made and continue to make, we keep coming back at least twice a year. Like everyone, we could go to other beaches, but we really enjoy Duck. Thanks again, Glenn and Evelyn.
Very nice.
That was very nice. And one more item, I'd like to ask Joe, if he could give us an update on the ped plan. Joe?
Here, sorry. So I did just want to give you a quick update. Obviously, we'd like to be patting ourselves on the shoulder and celebrating the successful completion at this point in time, but obviously that isn't the case at the moment. So I did want to let you know exactly where we're at and how we see this wrapping up over the next few weeks. So. Dominion Energy, I had the opportunity to talk with their crews this morning. They are seeking to wrap up right outside Town Hall on the northern end where they're tying in, splicing. They're seeking to do that today. So we'll hope we moved some cars out of their way and things this morning. And hope they're wrapping that. They're also were at work on the southern end at doing the same things down there. The key to this is that, RPC obviously cannot finish grading and, doing the work they even need to do to prepare those areas for sidewalk until Dominion gets out of the way. So they've had a few delays. They were supposed to have been done this about a week and a half ago, be done and out. But they ran across some things that were a little more complicated, particularly here on the northern end. And it's taken this long to get to this point. So they are hoping to be done that. And then RPC's plan, RPC has two different types of crews. So they have the grading crew, and then there's a concrete crew. What they would do at that point, as soon as Dominion done, RPC will bring in their grading crew to take care of those areas and prep them just like what you see elsewhere along the way there, grading it out, getting the gravel down so that the concrete crew just has to come in, do their form work, and pour. So the intent there is that RPC is at work now on the southern part, working their way north. And if Dominion gets out of there, then RPC will be able to grade that out and just continue flowing all the way along to complete and tie into the area up here where the sidewalk is dropped off, so it'd be right at our entrance into the park, the northern entrance there. So that's the plan. We are probably looking at at least week and a half for that to happen. That's if everything goes really smoothly with that. It is possible it would take on into the following week if there are any other little quirks. But RPC will be pouring some additional areas this week. It's a pretty substantial amount on the southern end of the project. So that's where we're at, and be glad to answer any questions the council might have.
So they're pouring while they wait for the grading. We'll probably
Correct.
see
They're
them
working
pour.
on the, so their concrete crews will work. They have enough of an area to work that they'll continue to work full bore, to come this direction to the north. They're working from south to north. They'll begin pouring at just north of the driveway at Aqua, and then work their way north.
When will that be?
Again, they're laying, the formwork was set for a lot of that yesterday. They're setting more formwork. They've already poured the section where the new stair and sidewalk in front of Ocean Atlantic Rentals, Sound Feet Shoes. So they've done that little area because of the stairs. They had some unique formwork they had to do there. So they did that section in one pour. I don't know whether they'll be pouring today or they're going to just wait until Friday and do one larger pour. The driveways are going to be the same as we've talked about throughout the project as far as them blocking off half of one. Again, and we understand it's not an ideal time for that at this point, for businesses, but we're looking at it as the sooner we can get it over with and get it out of the way, the better, and they can, go on with life and having that improved access to their properties. So.
Yeah, I did see them working over the weekend a couple times, so I'm not sure. Hopefully they'll maybe just keep working right through the holiday, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Joe, will they do the driveways before the weekend?
They will have, they'll be doing, again, there'll be partial ones,
Partial.
but yes, that is part of the plan, that they would pour the half drives, if you will. Yeah,
Not all of them. They're not going to get to all of them, but
yeah,
in that southern area.
okay.
Most
And just as a reminder, they will not be doing the driveway at 184 Duck Road. That's separately contracted with that owner to do that. Due to the timing of the completion of that building. Interestingly enough, RPC is the one who got that job. So, it works out great for us because they know what the standards are for the drive, and we'll put it in as well. But they'll do that
plus.
as that project winds up. But for a temporary basis, they'll have some gravel going across there.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to go down now with the agenda. Item number 1, presentation by Stewart on the CAMA land use plan update. Chris, are you going to introduce that, or Joe?
I'll just briefly introduce, excuse me, Jay and Elizabeth. They're with Stewart, and as you all know, we have contracted with them for the comprehensive plan land use, CAMA land use plan update. They've been busy the last couple days, or well, really, I guess yesterday and today. So the last 24 hours, meeting with staff, meeting with other stakeholder groups, and of course they will continue to do that through today. We're very happy that Stewart is on board, and we look forward to a great land use plan. And I'll turn it over to Joe for anything he might want to say. And so we'll turn it over to Jay.
A few words.
Joe's a loss for words.
I got a big chuckle.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay McLeod, and this is my colleague Elizabeth Alley. We're from Stewart, which is a firm that works in North Carolina, and we're very happy to be here. Thank you very much for having us. It's been a great 24 hours so far, and busy. So I'd like to introduce kind of a little bit more about the land use planning process and how we propose to go about the plan process. It's going to be about a year long, and we just kind of wanted, this is the kickoff, this is the initiation, and just wanted to introduce you all to that to the extent that you aren't already. Like I said, our firm is known as Stewart. We are in the Municipal Planning and Mobility Group, which is a group of AICP, land use, and local government planners, as well as some greenway and trail designers and planners. But Stewart as a whole is primarily civil engineers, structural engineers, bridge designers, road designers, landscape architects, and surveyors. And so we have offices in Raleigh, Charlotte, Durham, and now Wilmington has a surveying branch running out of there. And we work exclusively in North Carolina, our planning group does. And other than the two attractive faces in front of you here today, we have a team back at the home office that works across the state in small and medium-sized municipalities and counties. And that includes our principal in charge, our practice area leader, Cindy Schwarzkopf, who's been working for Stewart for over 13 years, and she's been doing land use planning across the state during that time. I myself have a background in both ecology and urban and regional planning, originally from Florida. So a lot of coastal communities in Florida, worked at regional planning councils there, and most recently I've been at the city of Clayton, working there as a local government planner, handling all the things that you see almost every day, and that the planning board definitely sees every day. And then now at Stewart, back to long-range planning, which is really where I like to be. Elizabeth has an extensive background in local government planning, mostly at the city of Raleigh, I believe, where she was for quite a long time, and she's been with Stewart longer than I have doing this very same work and also entitlement work. So we have a good perspective on what local governments go through every day and the types of plans that they need to support their efforts and make sure that they can run efficiently and effectively represent their citizens. There's also Jake Petrowski, who's a Knightdale native, and he is pretty specialized in GIS and land use planning, has been doing land use plans across the nation and in North Carolina prior to his work with Stewart. And so great data analytics mindset and analysis. Chad Seri is a former assistant town manager and does a lot of current land use planning in and around the area. Will Linville supports us from his Charlotte office. He's a GIS planner and urban designer. And then Christy Jackson is on the far right. She's a transportation and bike ped and trail planner, and she's worked across several states, but also mostly in North Carolina. And she's actually done, talked to her about Duck the other day. She said, oh yeah, I was down there doing surveys and taking traffic counts on the bike trail not too long ago. And so she said, I'll forward you all that data. And so she's, real big on data and engagement and cycling especially. And so kind of my specialty also has been coastal resiliency planning and working in CAMA communities with a knowledge of the coast and the unique conditions that those communities face. In general, the planning process kind of follows a four-step approach. We're right here in the very beginning. This is the kickoff phase. We're here to listen to stakeholders and staff, and that's what we've been doing, and find out their perspectives on the assets and challenges facing the town, and other things, opportunities to look for moving forward. So that's what we're doing today and tomorrow. And we've already talked to staff yesterday, toured the community with Joe and Sandy yesterday, been meeting with stakeholders all morning long. Then we'll move kind of into more inventory and analysis, mapping, and kind of visions and goals, coalescence. And then we move into plan development later on in the process, and then adoption. And you'll notice some of those dates are overlapping, but overall, we have about a year-long process that's been scoped out to complete this land use plan update. So initiation kind of starts with, like I said, doing all the research we can, learning everything we can about the community, being on the ground, taking pictures, going to the places that we've talked about with staff. We'll kind of move into the analysis, looking at the best available science and data that we have about the current conditions and possibly possible conflict points and troubles that may be something to look out for, and then bringing those to the advisory committee. So throughout this process, the advisory committee is going to be guiding this ship. And so we are always bringing this information that we gather and analyze back to them for their input and their guidance in terms of what direction to move forward. Then we work into how to present that in a way that's usable to both staff and the general public, and to capture the ideas both graphically and in words. We'll be developing or, revising the existing future land use map, which is a major component of any CAMA land use plan or comprehensive plan. And developing character areas to help guide rezonings. As you're no doubt aware, consistency with a land use plan is a requirement. Well, it's a consideration for rezonings. It's one of the data points that a council will consider when they weigh whether to make a legislative decision about land use. And so this will hopefully give you a compass in terms of the community's goals and visions so that you can weigh that against the specifics of any particular decision. And then we'll be moving into implementation and adoption at the end. There'll be a lot of public outreach, review, not just the advisory committee and the boards and the staff, but also the general public. And hopefully there's several touch points throughout. Elizabeth's going to talk more about that later. In fact, she's going to talk about it right now.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here in Duck. So we have been here for about 24 hours, and we have been doing a lot of listening and a lot of learning. I'm going to go through a couple of the ways that we are going to engage the Duck community, both in person and online. So over the past 24 hours, we have met with staff, we have been on a tour of your beautiful community, and we have started a series of stakeholder interviews that will continue this afternoon and tomorrow. We'll be having a public drop-in session this afternoon at 4:30, where anybody is welcome. And then we will wrap up our first trip here with a meeting of the advisory committee tomorrow. We also want to make sure that there are lots of ways that the community can be involved in this project, both in person and online. So we have worked with town staff to set up a project website that has links to background information, as well as ways to be in contact both with us and with town staff, ways to submit comments, ways to keep up with the project, and that website is intended to be a living document. So we will be updating that periodically, making sure that our announcements go out through there. We've also already been featured on social media, and we'll continue to be doing that, and we have a hashtag for the project. We'll be tweeting about it. Christian will be tweeting about it. We've been on Facebook. We have been in the e-newsletter that you all put out weekly, and so the idea is that we'll reach the people that are already engaged in your community, that come to your board meetings, but also try to get beyond that, right, to the homeowners associations, to property owners that might not be in town right now, and even to tourists that are coming to take advantage of your beautiful community during the summer. We will also be doing an online survey this summer that will probably be up for roughly 30 days, where we'll ask questions about the community's values, what they see as the biggest assets of the community, potential threats to those assets, and kind of a reaffirmation of the vision of the town and the steps that we can take to implement that vision. We'll also be doing a series of in-person engagement. So this is an example of an advisory committee meeting. Like Jay mentioned, we'll be bringing all of our information through the advisory committee and using them as a benchmark to make sure that we are going in the right direction with the project, making sure that all of our information is clear and legible to the general public before it ultimately culminates by coming back to you. But obviously, we want to keep you all engaged throughout the process, but they will be our most kind of hands-on community group. We'll also be coming for some public meetings where we will use lots of graphics to get people involved. One thing we've noticed is that there are different types of people. Some people like to speak in front of groups. Some people really don't like to raise their hand in front of a large audience and would prefer to leave written comments or to mark on a map. And so in these meetings, we'll be doing things like visual preference surveys where you use sticky dots to point out things that you like or don't like. People really love these large format maps like you can see on our slide, where they can gather around and mark the places in their community that they love the most, places they might feel are threatened, places that they feel might need improvement. And then we'll have kind of open houses where people can talk. We might have a presence at some of the community events that you all have throughout the season, whether that is through staff or online or even in person, or oftentimes we'll just leave boards at those events for people to participate with. We want to make sure that we have as many varied and high quality options for people to be involved in the project as they want to be, right? So again, we have a year-long schedule. This is a little bit hard to read on the screen, but it's on the back of the handout that's in front of you, and it's also on the project website. So these dates could shift a little bit, but generally we're looking at a year-long project where we'll come for multiple touches in person throughout the project, but have ways to be involved online throughout. So culminating, we'll have a series of public meetings in July, and then again in the fall. Is that correct? In the fall, coming back to the advisory committee multiple times and to you as well. And I think that's all I have for. There'll be spring when we come back. Okay, great. It's hard for me also to read it on the screen. So I am going to turn it back over to Jay to talk about our initial impressions that we've had so far.
So I don't want to jump the gun too much because we're still learning and gathering information, but it's pretty clear that tourism is pretty important to Duck. I could have told you that before I got here, though, and I'm sure you all know it. It's been interesting learning more about the economy and what drives it and how the different forces within it interact together and kind of provide support for each other. Elizabeth pointed out earlier that there are a number of different perspectives, but they seem to coalesce pretty well towards a shared goal. And so that's been very interesting. We've heard a lot about, of course, traffic and mobility, and then also resiliency in terms of, especially with regard to storms, in terms of, being up and being back to business and able to operate. But I don't want to, get too ahead of the stakeholder engagement and listening process, but I would like to answer any questions or comments, or if you have any guidance or additional issues that you think are important, or if you just want to let the stakeholder meetings and the process play out, that's fine. Also, we're just here to listen and would love to take any comment you might have. And if we have to leave right after this, it's because we have another stakeholder meeting lined up. So thank you so much for having us.
I have a question. It sounds really exciting, and I'm so glad you're having all these different ways for people to engage. Have you seen a vision before, like the way we have with, and I was curious how our visioning that we've been doing independent of the CAMA plan is going to play into what you guys are doing. It's just one element, or have you encountered a vision before when you're working with towns?
Yes, I mean, we did notice right away that you all had most recently engaged in a visioning effort not too long ago, and it's definitely become a starting point for the visioning process throughout that, and it's actually, it's mostly all there. But there are potentially some other components that might be incorporated, and so we'll be kind of revetting that through the community and also reaffirming that is still the desired direction, and then also seeing if there's anything maybe that people want to add. But we are building definitely from the work that's been done and not trying to recreate any wheels, especially ones that have been so recently turned.
Great, thank you.
Jay, how's your relationship with the CRC and CAMA with respect to adoption of your land use plans?
Right, I'd say it's pretty good. We just recently had a land use plan approved in the town of Swansboro, and another one will be up for certification in August, September for Carolina Beach. I have yet to meet the representative from the northern area, but I will either today or tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to meeting with her. I've spoken with her on the phone. Today. The CAMA certification process is it's a legislatively mandated process. Obviously, there's a room for interpretation there, and we'll be working closely with staff and with the representative to make sure that we check all the boxes that they need, but also accurately represent the vision that Duck has for its own future.
Jay, I know you've worked with a lot of coastal communities, but have you worked with one with demographics that are similar to ours?
That's an interesting question, because duck is definitely a unique animal. It really is a unicorn, so to speak. Especially meeting with some of the stakeholders this morning that represent different groups and hearing their perspective from their individual industries about how duck factors in and lays differently than other communities. But probably the most recent one that we've worked with would be the town of Cullowhee, which is in the mountains. And surprisingly, though, that the geography is different, it's a very vacation and vacation rental oriented community with a very small year-round population that caters to a specific demographic mix that is somewhat exclusive and higher end. And so that kind of frame of reference can help inform work in areas like Duck. But Duck is definitely unique from its neighbors and from a lot of communities in probably the nation.
So when you worked with Cullowhee, because the last time we did this, there wasn't social media, right? I mean, that's a brand-new technology that we have, and we weren't able to connect with people that way. It was newsletters, and I guess Facebook was just coming on board, maybe. But, so in Colway, did you use social engagement? Was it successful?
It was. That's the short answer. I think, especially in a community where you have people that are very invested in your community that might not be physically here at the moment, online technology is a great way to reach them. So we have been doing online surveys in many of the communities where we work and have gotten a great representative slice of the community. It's also an interesting way to get at younger audiences and audiences that might not often show up for public meetings. If that's time commitments, maybe they work in the service industry, or maybe they're out of town. So that's a great way. I mean, I think your staff is doing a really wonderful job of using online engagement already, and so there's a really robust audience for the e-newsletter.
Yeah.
So we'll be making sure to coordinate our messaging across all of those, so you're not getting one message on Facebook and another message in the e-newsletter, but making sure that we're using consistent language and using all of those avenues, including, we're on the sign out front of Town Hall. That's awesome, right? So, not neglecting that, paper and signs and kind of old school face-to-face conversation is important too.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I think that's it for the questions. We appreciate Jay and Elizabeth, your presentation. Look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Going to go on to item number 2, which is discussion of proposed full year 2020 budget. This is a working session for the council. And at first, I'd like to ask Chris if there's any comments you'd like to make before we start reviewing the budget.
The only comment I really have related to this is there aren't any surprises in the budget. All the items that are included are things that we've talked about at some level. There is no tax increase proposed, and so the tax increase that was implemented last year, I think, is still adequate to fund our services and operations, even with some additions for the next year, perhaps year or two. As always, there are complicating factors in the future that we have no control over. One of those is, whether other towns raise their taxes, which of course won't impact us next year, but will the year afterward. And so, at some level, we always have to be cognizant of the decisions we make, not just how they impact the year we're talking about, but as we go forward. And that's what I try to do with the 5-year forecast. There is a Harry Brown, sales tax bill that's still out there.
Adjectives, or is that a name?
Harry Brown, every year he puts one in to redistribute the sales tax revenue, and if that were to happen, there would be sorry, my sensor just died. If that were to happen, Dare County would get hit the hardest. And, so depending on how it would be implemented, when it would be implemented, you're probably talking around $300,000 in lost revenue, specifically to the town, not to the county, but specifically to the town. That bill has not grown feet and advanced over the last several years, but you're just a few votes away from something like that happening. Again, that's nothing we can control today, but it is something to be aware of as we go forward. Other factors in the out years. We know that public safety building is still working its way through the process. It may become an item this year if we're able to get through, and if we're able to get through to the engineering phase. And if that were to be the case, this budget would have us pull that funding from the fund balance to fund the engineering and architectural fees to get us to final construction. Another out year item that we need to be aware of. Obviously, beach nourishment at some point, and we've talked about, we've talked about the implications of where we set that rate. Again, that's coming down the pike soon. Not something we have to address today, but will certainly have an impact going forward. Sort of related to that, we know we have a revaluation that'll be coming down the pike soon, and we'll have to discuss revenue rates. So there's a lot of unknowns in the out years that certainly decisions we make today could impact those. One very specific item that for final adoption we would make an adjustment on, it looks like, is the RPC has moved forward with repaving or putting concrete in the northern area. We originally thought they weren't going to have enough time to put that in before the summer started. They have started that process. We expect that to be finished this fiscal year, and so in the streets and highways for the duck trail repaving, we would be pulling some funding out of that would then be reflected as going into the fund balance in this budget. But we would take care of that at final adoption. I had already, because we were told that they wouldn't be able to get to it till the fall, I had already budgeted that money into next year. So that's just one change that when we get to that point, I will note it again, but I wanted to bring that up now. Aside from that, I'm pleased with the budget that I've presented. I think it adequately reflects the goals as I know them from the council, and I'm happy to discuss it further with you.
Thank you, Chris. As in past years, we'll go through this item by item, and any questions you have, we can address to Chris and staff as appropriate. And we'll start with the revenue section. If there's any questions that council has.
Chris, I guess, simple one.
Are you plugged in? I'm sorry. Are you on?
Also,
I don't see your light. Let me use mine. Oh, there it goes.
Yeah.
got it.
There it goes.
Just a simple one, Chris. The towns are starting to announce what they're doing tax-wise. Is there any deviation from what you had presumed in here?
Not in the current.
Hear the question?
I said the
sorry.
towns are starting to announce what they're doing tax-wise for the coming year. Is it any different, or is it having any impact on where you are with revenues at this point?
Not for this fiscal year. Built into the forecast, I always do include a fudge factor, knowing that some kind of change is going to be made. And right now, with the rumors that I've heard, which until we see everything sort of in writing and we know what's adopted, it's all guesswork. But with the rumors I've heard, what I have included in the budget with the percentages for out years does compensate for that.
Okay.
again, that could change depending on what happens, but with the rumors that I've heard so far, which are mostly, Nag's Head, my projections take that into account.
So you're comfortable then that at this point, at least our 5-year projection is reasonable?
Yes, I believe it's reasonable.
Chris, I just have one question on the government access channel grant. We normally get $10,000, and you've got that in there as early, you just,
We'll appropriate that once we, once we apply for it and
any other questions for Chris on the revenues? All right, let's go to expenditures, and we'll go do that by item, starting with the governing body.
I'd just like to say, as we embark on the expenditures, where I'm cutting to the quick on this is that I think you're correct in that you've laid out a pretty comprehensive look at 2020 budget, 1920. Where I was struggling was thinking about it in the future, which I know we're not really compelled to do here, but it's really heavy on my mind based on just everything, from lifeguard requirements to personnel costs and just overall changes that are coming down the pike. So I just thought I'd lay that out there as an overall question mark for me, because this is all palatable. We'll certainly go through it, but that's where I'm struggling, is thinking ahead. So on that question, then I'll stop talking. For now, can you please remind me when we would be looking at revaluation? Would it be for the 21-22 budget, you think?
So when I asked the question, I was told that I was told that FY20 is when the work would be done, and then we would be looking at FY21, which would be the next budget.
Okay.
As I'm doing the math in my head, that's a lot of work to get done. So I have a question, but that's in my own mind, and I just have failed to follow up with the county manager on it. But originally it was 20 for reval for the work to be done, and then 21 for it to be implemented. What causes me some pause is that the way, there's sort of a little lag where the like the tax scroll is like the FY19, or is the 19 tax scroll, but it's for 20, and so I'm thinking that might have been how he answered the question. So
possibly next budget cycle, but maybe the cycle after.
Yes, and for our purposes, as far as as far as the projections, it just assumes revenue neutral. It doesn't include. And when I say revenue neutral, I don't mean a revenue neutral rate, which includes an increase. I mean the same factors that I've been using. So a 0.25% assessed value increase, which is a little low, not significantly low. We've seen 0.4%. So it's not anything that's going to bring in big revenues, but I do put a little factor in there, and that's the one I continue to use.
Thank you.
I think by law, Chris, too, it's got to be done by 2021.
I'm sorry, Don, I couldn't.
By law, it's got to be done by 2021.
Yeah, because that's the eight years, if I remember correctly.
I think for our planning purposes, it should be, you really don't have to count at it because it's really not going to be a significant impact.
Sure, sure. The only thing that obviously the revaluation where it hits you, or where it gets complicated, there's obviously the revenue neutral rate, and if where you set the rate, but the bigger issue is everyone else is doing the same thing, and so and so that's where it gets a little tricky, because you're trying to position yourself to not lose significant revenues.
We know that story.
Yeah.
I guess when we talk about expenditures, you hit the nail on the head. Our big cost is personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And this budget assumes some growth, including an assistant manager this coming year.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, are you assuming any other growth that's significant?
I have not in the projections put in any additional positions, and there are two reasons for that. One is, in spite of, I'll say, desires or thoughts that additional employees may be needed, for example, in police or fire, I have not been convinced of that. And I am not going to guess. I could put in a fudge factor, but I'm not even at the point where I feel comfortable putting in a fudge factor.
Okay, so you're planning to keep it level at this point?
Yes,
So our increases should be at something like 3% a year.
Well, it's that position.
yeah. So, you're looking at, other factors in there. Other factors. So the factors that would go into the salaries obviously are merit increases, which for total salary, the merit bonus, the health insurance, and then any changes that might come from there always seems to be incremental changes to ledgers, the retirement, that sort of thing. Yeah, I think a 3%, somewhere in that range is probably accurate.
Good.
Just returning to government body, are there any questions on any of what's been requested there?
Just the sanitation line, you're estimating that we're going to be at $1,045,000, but only projecting or recommending $1,005,000. So it's just, is that because we had some unprecedented expense?
Well, that includes, the previous year includes disaster cleanup.
So you're not accounting for disaster?
No,
Okay.
no.
Thanks.
Can we hold those types of questions until we get to
Oh, I'm
the particular
sorry.
subject?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just think it might be easier to go through by item.
I'm on the wrong page.
That's all right. That's okay.
Sorry.
If there's nothing else on government, let's go on to administration. Chris, does that include the new position?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. When is that going to be, Chris? What's your target?
I'm not going to rush it. I'm going to work diligently for it, but my guess would be probably I wouldn't see anything before the first of the year, really, unless something an applicant falls on my lap.
Would it not be good to try to make sure we have that person in, so they're involved in the budget process?
Certainly, I think that would be be ideal if it can be worked out. But again, my feeling on the position is I want to work diligently to filling it, but I don't want to just fill the position. I want to, I want to find the right person, and I want to be diligent in how I do it. So yeah, ideally, yes.
Any additional questions on administration? Major increase being that one position? If not, let's go on to finance.
That one's kind of a fixed cost.
The rate of collection is outstanding.
What's that?
The rate of collection is outstanding.
Yes.
There being nothing there, let's go on to legal.
It's reasonable.
Yeah.
Is there some reason,
Well, for Robert's here, we always tell him he's too expensive. That's right. Public buildings?
excuse me, Don, on the legal, since we're out of the, are we out of the easements at this point for the pedestrian, or are we still working on it?
We'll still be working on some.
We do, I've had a preliminary estimate based on some of the surveys with the redesign of the width of that, and we're looking at very few. We're going to be able to accommodate this. They're anticipating only 2 easements, and even both of those will be of the temporary nature. Not, in other words, we're not having to go onto property for the most part on that. So they're estimating 2. And they're still, and I say they, VHB is still looking at whether we would need other temporary ones, but it won't be as much as in past years.
Well, that was the reason for my question is because we're expecting a significant increase.
It's the same as last year.
No,
No?
Well,
I'm looking at legal.
we
6,000.
budgeted 70 and we're requesting 70.
I'm looking at this page.
Went up 6,000. 5,000.
The estimate for this year is 64, and we're budgeting 70, but the load is going down, not up.
Well, if you're budgeting it, doesn't mean you're actually going to spend it all.
If you expect the workload to go down.
I'd like to say I'd expect the workload to go down, but when it comes to legal, it never seems to go down as much as we expect it to.
It's been pretty stable for the last,
And it's essentially a flat budget year over year.
It's flat from last year.
Right.
it's been flat for the last 4 years, 3 years.
We did have an increase at one point, didn't we? At least,
Yeah, there was one, well,
hourly, no, I'm talking about just their flat
oh, their
fee.
rate, yeah.
I remember that came up maybe a year ago, too.
Is it okay to move on from legal? Moving on to public buildings.
Is that, excuse me, is that the boardwalk repairs in the public buildings, is that anticipating another Michael, or do we have things that we?
No, this is really just anticipating normal wear and tear items.
What is the number I've heard? Is it 5% a year? You should budget for that.
I've never used that number. I'm not sure.
Chris, could you remind me what the outlay would be, or the estimate is, if this is the appropriate time to ask this question, for the engineering for the new safety building?
The estimate we're working with right now is 450,000.
So if we were to expect that in this year, which is unpredictable, you would have put it in this section?
Yeah. It would have been,
So
it would have likely been under professional services.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have to
special
reappropriate
or
that?
professional?
Are we going to have to reappropriate that?
Professional, the first item.
So you're looking at plus 450,000.
In the public buildings line item,
Yeah.
potentially.
It's going to be there, it's just which year is it going to happen?
Yes.
If we get the green light.
If we get
Yeah.
the green light. So, because out in '22, you've got the,
The debt service on that.
the debt on it.
Yeah.
So somewhere between now and '22, there's another 450,000
Exactly.
that we need to include.
Exactly. And again, I
Needs to go somewhere.
it needs to go somewhere in the projections.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure that I didn't include that as a deduction in the, I'll have to when we get to that point, I'll double check it, but I may have already factored that in.
In some other area.
Yeah. It's not reflected in this budget, but I may have pulled it from the fund. I may have actually showed it pulled from the fund balance, because that's where it's coming.
I remember you talking about
When we get there, double check it. I mean, and I can always make that adjustment if I overlooked that when I was finalizing the projections. So, a lot of moving parts.
That's for sure.
Let's move on to information technology. Significant investments this year.
And the big thing here are the server upgrades. I think that positions us well. That's that's what you see in the capital outlay under 5,000. That's an expenditure I think that we've been putting off for a while, and we need to do it. Part of this is also, there's the server piece of it, and then there's the, I sort of call it the cleanup work, all associated with getting everything in shape with the cabling. I mean, even though we've only been here several years, there's been so much craziness, like in this closet and the other closet, and as we've incrementally done the upgrades, that they want to come in and focus while they're doing the server project to make sure that everything is again, I'll use the term that works for me, is cleaned up. But that's not dusting, that's
Streamlining.
and making sure everything's marked. It's going to be changing certain things around so that they're more easily accessible, and it's a lot of time, not necessarily materials, but a lot of time in order to do that. So
I'm just glad we're not Baltimore with that ransomware, and nobody, I think we're not a target for that.
yeah, every
Too
time I get irritated at something else getting spammed, and put into my spam folder that I find a week later that I was looking for, I think about Baltimore, and I'm like, I like you guys. Good spam folder.
Nothing else in that area. Let's move on to police.
What are we averaging now on vehicle life?
We're getting close to 7 years out of most of the vehicles. That's correct, right?
That's a great increase, because 10 years ago, we were at 3.
Yeah, we're making. We've got a good plan. Unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, the vehicles that are spec'd for, and if I misspeak, please step in, but the vehicles, the Ford Interceptor, Explorer, Interceptor Explorer, whatever they call it, is now offered as a hybrid. And so we'll be getting the hybrid versions of those, which have been significantly upgraded specifically for police. One of the biggest examples, which hopefully we would never have to deal with, but the rear ends have resistance up to 75 mile per hour hit. So if someone rammed in, it'll I guess take that as long as you don't break your neck in the process. So the vehicles are slightly higher, a few $1,000s higher than we were originally looking at, but we feel like it's a good investment.
Get it back in operating costs.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, I have a question about the overtime.
Yes.
The salaries. Is it a staffing shortages? Was it injuries? Was it, just bad timing, a lot of people out and?
There were two factors there. One is we did have some people out.
Yeah.
And so that is the significant factor in this. The other piece is I won't say I changed how some of it was calculated, but I discovered that that we were coding it in a way that I didn't want it to be coded, and that was holiday pay, and that was being shown as in the normal salary items, and in that extra pay I wanted to be shown in overtime, and so that was a big difference from previous years, and frankly it took a while to get that factored in specifically.
So this year's projection is just more normal, so the 40 requests?
Yes.
Yeah.
Previously, it would have been reflected in overages in the annual salaries.
Okay.
And it actually took, not that you guys necessarily want this level of detail, but it took me a while to figure out why my annual salary calculations weren't coming closer because I was, I always seemed to be over more than I expected, or closer to the line than I expected, and so we turned around and I figured out that some of it was how we were just coding overtime. So.
Thanks.
Anything additional on police? If not, let's move on to fire. The plan is still to replace the deputy fire chief, Chris?
Yes, that's correct. With Walker's retirement, yes.
And that person will just use his previous vehicle? And
We're
step
still
it up.
moving, the request is still to move forward with the replacement of that vehicle. So, but there won't be an additional vehicle purchased, it'll be a replacement.
You lost me.
even though the budget request was a replacement vehicle, includes a replacement vehicle for the deputy chief. Even though the deputy chief is retiring, we're still moving forward with the purchase of the vehicle because we will have another deputy chief.
Thank you. That's what I thought you meant.
Sometimes I take the long way around.
If there's nothing on fire, let's move on to inspections. Everyone okay with inspections? If so, let's move on to ocean rescue.
So the ocean rescue line item does include the whole package for the additional guards, the increase, the H1N1 influenza virus visa or whatever it is.
Next up.
So it's the whole thing. The projections only include a factor based on this. It doesn't. The projections don't include additional stands or anything in the out years. I did not include those. Once again, because I think that is a plan that hasn't been. I'm not convinced that it's needed yet, and so I didn't want to include that when I don't feel like it's something that I can comfortably justify after this year. I feel very comfortable with the request that was made in the additional expenses for this year, but I think that I think a more incremental approach to future additions of guards, whether it stands or whatever, is something that we need to look at on a annual basis. And so that's what the projections reflect. That's what the forecast and the projections reflect.
Once we get through this international recruiting process this coming year, does that not,
I didn't hear the question.
once we get through the recruiting, international recruiting for the coming year, is that an expense that's a one-time, or is it going to be a repeated expense?
My understanding is that initially it will have to be renewed, but the initial year is the large expense. The renewals are less of a factor. So what would be included would be essentially what's included, or what I would anticipate that we would come back with when we go, if this is approved and we go to contract, would be a factor in for essentially a cost of living expense adjustment each year, which does include whatever those additional costs would be. And again, what's reflected in the projection is what those is what the current estimate is that was provided previously.
The projections and the estimates are including, you just,
Yeah, so so we go from 387 to 486, and then beyond that doesn't include the whole slew of guards and everything. Those are those are what his estimated, at the time of this discussion, what his estimated changes would be each year for operations, for additional expenses, for other items.
So just to put words in your mouth, no stands and no new guards.
Correct.
In these estimates.
In these estimates.
Thank you.
The international part is my memory was he was really putting all the cost on us as opposed to spreading it. Because those people are going to be used wherever in his total operation, not just in Duck.
Yes. That is certainly the impression I got.
And if that's the case, then we ought to see some decrease proportionally to the number of guards we have compared to the total number that he has.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to expect that there could be a decrease in these out years that's more reflective of that cost being shared.
Well, even this 100,000, I would imagine it should be shared in that one too. I don't know what percentage of his guards we have, but it would seem to me that we shouldn't be paying more than our share.
Yeah, if I recall, I think he said basically that Southern Shores didn't have the extended period. I mean, the increase in stands and guards was here. He also made mention that in the federal contract, he had to pay a certain federal rate down there in the seashore. So, yeah, he made mention that he did not spread the cost.
Well, he didn't. He indicated we were going to pay the whole thing, I thought, and I couldn't figure out why, given.
Well, I think Don reflected his thinking was that the big issue is finding those guards that that can still be here when everyone goes back to school, and those would be the international guards. And so I think that's probably, I don't want to speak for Merrick, but I think that's probably his logic in cost accounting it to us. Whether we accept that or not is a different thing, but I think that's his logic.
Because we need the fall guards, and also,
None of those other costs needed.
yeah, nobody else needs them.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
And I think, not to speak for him either, but I think he's been underestimating his expenses, I guess, is why the jump too.
Well, no, that jump is salary, a big piece of salary.
You had to adjust the salaries up to be competitive.
Right.
Right.
And in my understanding, at least in the, a lot of that was being pushed by NAG's head, and my understanding is that that is, at least from a request standpoint, is going through. I mean, the request, and I think it's even some of the justification for the tax increase is that, the additional cost for guards. And the reality of that is that it is going to factor into our ability to get guards, because it's going to start a
Change.
It's going to start a chain reaction, yeah. So.
NAG's head also, I think, is trying to put in another station in the south end,
Okay.
or at least a different one.
Any further discussion on ocean rescue? There being none, let's move on to streets.
And this is on the capital outlay over 5,000. That's where there'll probably be in the final budget about a $60,000 decrease in this request, because this reflects the trail improvements in the north.
Now, this doesn't reflect, this reflects the expenditures, right?
Yes,
Not any grants we get for this stuff.
correct.
Is the reason RPC's up there because they're not here? Is there one good thing that came from this?
Well, yes. And the short answer to that is yes. The longer answer, of course, is much more complicated, which is, why couldn't they be there previously? And I don't have an adequate answer to that question.
But if that was because of this, at least there's something good.
Yes, yes. Just in enough time to tear it up, and then they come back here, so.
Chris, is phase 1 of phase 3 for $724,000, is that just the west side? Or is that west and east of phase 3?
It's just the east side.
Just the east side, not the west side?
Is east.
Yeah, yeah, so
Phase 3 is the east.
This is the east side from basically Duck Deli to Ship's Watch.
Yeah.
East side, that's what I meant, east side.
And then phase 4, which
All right.
we would be getting into engineering for, would be the west side then.
Okay.
With the same
Same general area, but.
general area.
Yeah.
But that takes account of being able to get around the inlet?
Yeah, I mean, it's in that area.
There's space for that there?
We believe there is at this point. We're still verifying, but we do think there's going to be.
The reason I asked the question is because if we go ahead with phase 3 and then discover there isn't enough, it meant phase 3 needed to be pushed inward toward the ocean.
Yeah, well, the difference.
We really need to know whether we got the space before we do phase 3.
At this point, we believe there's space. We are sure enough of that we believe there's enough for phase 4. We believe there's enough right-of-way space for us to get the sidewalk in there, and that is the
And
plan.
the bike
That what's that?
And the bike path.
And the bike path, the bike lane, not bike path, bike lane. So we feel very confident that that's going to work. We may have to tweak it a little bit. There may be an area where instead of 5 feet, it's 4 foot. But that's what the final surveying and everything, when we get the final engineering, will do. But right now, we believe that it will work. We're confident enough that it'll work, that the plans that they're finalizing for phase 3 are being adjusted. So instead of being an 8-foot walk, they're going to be, it's going to be a 5-foot sidewalk. The greatest benefit of that is that it greatly reduces the bulkheads and the easements that we need. The bulkheads being the real expensive part of it. I mean, when you're talking, some of those bulkheads would have had to have been 10, 12 feet, and so we don't have to do that now. And so it's a huge cost reduction. If you recall, that phase was originally about the estimate was 1.2 million. We're now down to 724 now. 100,000 of that was the transformer, which was taken place of, but between the concrete and the reduction in the cost of the concrete that's needed and the reduction in number and size of bulkheads, it really reduces the cost. So,
As I mentioned before, the Tourism Board thinks very highly of Duck's grant applications in this area, in the fact that we're very accurate in terms of what our needs really are, and we hit it on the head all the time, as opposed to many of the requests they get.
well, except for this year.
Huh?
Except for this year, but that was beyond our control.
Completely.
So,
Yeah, that's a different problem. But no, they held us up as the star as far as grant applications, and that says a lot about your staff.
yeah, the staff is great.
Chris, I know this isn't the time to get into the minutia of the trail, but will we have an opportunity to really examine those next two phases together before we sort of go into 3?
The short answer to that is,
Why?
well, I mean, the short answer is we can. I mean, we certainly can if council wants, but if we're going to do that, we need to do it now, because our timeline for bids and everything is getting shorter. So, I mean, if there's a specific concern, you know, if there's a specific concern about design or something like that, then, you know, I would suggest that, you know, that you talk to Joe or I, or we work with VHB when they're here. If there's a larger concern about rocks or, you know, what type of vegetation is going to go in, you know, those are things that that we can likely deal with without having to slow down the specifications. So,
Well, I gave you my concern.
sure,
And that I really would like to see, to be sure we're dead on, because I don't want to see us make it so narrow that we're really scratching our heads about doing it.
yeah, and so that's phase 4, and you'll see the way the process. I mean, what we try to do is before we get to phase 4, you will. And I thought we were talking about phase 3, but if you're talking about phase 4, then we will bring a concept to you at the retreat and go over it again there, and you know, and seek comments from that, and that's, you know, and that's before we go to bid or anything.
That's before we go to bid 4 or bid 3?
So 3 is where we're busy trying to get ready to get the bid documents out on the street.
And it would seem to me that in doing that, we need to see that 4, at least from a design standpoint, is sound, so that we're content with what we're doing on 3, and we're not causing a problem on 4.
What's your,
And that's only
are you
design.
guys saying the same thing, that you're concerned about
I'll
looking
tell you,
at
I
3
mean,
with 4?
What I'm sort of, where I'm at right now is we're about to do land use planning, and over the last several years, we've seen flooding in that area. So, you know, said the most basic way, I'm concerned about sort of the resiliency, or just that area being so vulnerable. And so I'm not quite sure what the solution is, but until sort of that sound side, resilience, coastal, you know, until we kind of get that perhaps looked at and assessed, I'm just concerned about any kind of infrastructure on either side of the road right there.
Where 3
Because-
is.
Well, now,
Well, no, where we've had flooding, so like from, is it Sound Sea?
It's a good chunk of 3.
well,
Well, yeah, it's 3, it's
But
like
now-
3 and 4, so it's Oceanside and Soundside. So I'm less worried about, you know, do we have enough width? And I'm just more concerned is, you know, is it so vulnerable there that, you know, does it,
So to step back a second
Yeah.
there. When you talk about resiliency, and I just had this discussion the other day when we met with Audubon, and they were talking about resiliency, and I said, how are you defining resiliency? Most folks define resiliency as the ability to recover. Certainly on the east side, I have no concerns about our ability to
Right.
recover. We're not going to lose that infrastructure on that size.
I mean, it might get flooded.
Exactly, but
Yeah.
that's, I mean,
Right.
again,
It goes away.
It won't get taken out. Might be messed up, but
on the west side, if the question is, am I concerned about a washout that causes the concrete to collapse and that kind of thing? My short answer to that is no. I'm not concerned. Do I think that there are going to be times when there's going to be water and debris and stuff on the sidewalk there because of a storm? Yes.
Yeah.
I absolutely think that's going to happen. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is, okay, so what can we do in that area? What's the potential for us to do, and what can we potentially do in that area to lessen the vulnerability?
Right.
Okay? And yes, that does have to deal with the sidewalk, but it's also independent of the sidewalk. What we have done, and we're doing it as part of coming down the pike here in this budget, you're going to see $15,000 for the permitting for the sills. That includes location of SAVs and that sort of thing, and we've added that to that area so that we can determine, so that we can start that process. What complicates it there is, you know, it's not our property, it's not NCDOT's property, and so at some point, we do have to get into riparian rights and what we can do. Now, I don't think that's an issue that can't be overcome, and I'm not saying that that's something that we're, you know, I'm just saying that that's an issue, but our thought is that we have to look at it in two ways. We have to do some of the work to see what's out there so that we know what's available to us to then come up with another design. You know, ideally, you know, trying to work out a project like happened in Kitty Hawk, you know, where they did the sills and everything, you know, something like that would be great, and frankly, I wouldn't see why, you know, the property owners there would object, except for you can never guess how some people are going to feel about things. But we also know that if we have the same SAV issue, then we're going to have to come up with a totally different kind of concept. And it may be, at a minimum, trying to do some sills that at least take care of the normal erosion, and we can put them out in an area where we're not dealing with riparian rights, and we can do that. So that's our strategy on how to approach that.
Okay. I guess I asked the question to start with because I lived there for 15 years, and I watched, I can't remember which hurricane it was, take out half the road, close us down for 3 or 4 days until they repaired it.
Yeah, Irene did knock that out.
No, what?
Shoot up the road? Irene?
I don't think it was Irene. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, the road got chewed up.
Half the road disappeared, and the road was closed for about 3 or 4 days till they got it repaired.
Yeah, that was Irene.
It was Irene. And so that's the worst case. And I think we can anticipate that at some point, we're going to have a worst case again.
Sure.
So if we put it in there, we're going to have to anticipate that, you know, some unfortunate year, we're going to have to put it back in.
Sure.
It goes to the question of just, do we have the maximum amount of space there because of the erosion that has occurred and the fact that now all they've got is riprap?
Yeah.
Are you satisfied, as we bid 3, that 4 is okay, and could we just see that, and we'll go from there? Recognizing that we're going to lose that one of these years. I mean, it's just foregone conclusion.
I am certainly satisfied that the sidewalk that we can put a sidewalk in there, and that when I say that, you know, it may have to be adjusted slightly, I'm factoring in if, you know, 6 inches or a foot here and there, if we can't get easements from property owners, that sort of thing. I think there's enough property. We have been told that there's enough room, and I am confident that is the case. I am glad to provide you something from the engineers saying that.
That'd be perfect.
Yes.
I have similar concerns to Chuck in that, you know, I watch that sound get closer every day. I mean, it's definitely a problem. And, you know, I'm concerned that we make 3 small, end up not being able to do 4, and then wish we had made 3 bigger.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's what Chuck was trying to say.
That's what I'm saying.
And
Thank
I
you.
wonder if we might not be rushing the gun on 3 just a little bit. I know it throws a monkey wrench into lots of plans and things, but that sound is getting closer every day. And it just worries me that we may not be better off from a resiliency standpoint or a maintenance standpoint to just say, you know what? Let's make phase 3 bigger and say we're going to keep them over here until we get past that trouble area. That area is not going to get better. That area has been slowly eroding since I was born here.
Yeah.
You know, that little cut, that little cove in there has been getting smaller and smaller every year, and it's going to keep happening.
And the water keeps coming over the road.
I apologize for the extremely large and rusty monkey wrench I may have just thrown, but
But
still
would
concerned
that,
about it.
not to get too granular, but we already have, so if you're, because where we're really saving money on 3 is not doing the bulkheading. I wonder, you know, if we could just push everything over, you know, in other words.
More
keep the-
eastward?
No, I mean, like the lines on the road. For example, if we were to forego 4 and just make 3 wider,
That's what
do the same thing where you keep the
And
bulkhead.
that's the reason for the question.
You keep the, you don't encroach on the east in the bulkhead. You know, you save your money with the bulkheading, so then you just push everything a little further west with lines and stuff.
Unfortunately, that's not that's DOT.
Okay.
And
That gets sticky.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
That's not easy.
if they were, you know, yeah, I mean, that's not asking for a DOT encroachment agreement. That's
Telling DOT
Changing
to.
getting into a major issue. And, you know, and that's, and to a certain extent, all of that's well and good. If you don't want to keep, I mean, if you're happy with delaying the project, because we're gonna have to delay the project. I mean, we're looking at, you know, we would be looking at, I mean, to change the road. Now, if you wanted to go back to 8 feet in that area, my new favorite line with this project is it's nothing that money can't fix. And so,
doing.
found that.
You might not do 4. It's not.
and the only concern we have about 4, the only concern is that from a use standpoint, and this was something that we had some significant discussions about with previously even putting it to 8, whether 8 feet was, yes, we're building it to double the capacity, but the use patterns are such that we won't see that double capacity. People are still going to use the bike, what's essentially the bike lane. They're just going to use it as a sidewalk, and you know, and that, I mean, that's what we see now, and so So that's just a, I mean,
It might be
you know,
big enough to be 6 there. I mean, there's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Just,
Yeah,
it came up. I've been thinking about it.
Chris, the RFP will go out, what,
I
August,
think
September
it's
timeframe?
back to Chris. If, I just would feel more comfortable if we had the layout and said, this is what we think we got.
yeah, and, I mean,
That'll answer a lot.
I think that'll answer the question. And when we see that, what does it show that we've got west of that lane? How much room have we got before we fall into the?
sure, sure.
Well, we have a couple months to work this, Chris. Isn't that okay to get
And
VHB?
I don't think that's
Maybe
I don't think that's should be a big deal for our consultants to be able to tell us.
Oh, I think, you know, I think, yeah, I think,
get them re-engaged.
I think that's a question that we can easily, I could get that in the next, probably in the next couple days.
Yeah, and I think that would make us feel
You know,
much more
if we
comfortable.
want to, you know, if we want to, if,
I don't want to redesign anything. I just want to see so that we're comfortable with what the plan really
sure,
is.
sure. Yeah, we can do that, and then, you know, and then we can, I mean, we can, you know, we can take whatever action we need to take at that point.
If anything is needed. From what you're describing, it sounds like it's fine. But I think it would make us much more comfortable.
Yeah,
Well, I think the important thing is we re-engage VHB prior to issuing the RFP, August, September.
sure.
When we're satisfied that in fact what we're going to do on the west side is satisfactory and feasible.
I think it's great that if we can fit that in on the west side, it'll be nice. What, in addition to that, Chris, is a crossover plan for coming down the bike trail when you get to that point? How do we get the bikes on the other side of the road?
Yeah, the concept is they get to this, they come down, they hit the, of course, when it's finally built, they'll hit the, they're supposed to cross at the refuge island and get on the other side.
It would cause a log jam.
Well,
I noticed, even with what we got now, they're not crossing over.
Yeah, and some of that is, you know, we hope to be in a position to better educate, is the way I would put it, once we have the facilities on both sides. Then we can start seeing, okay, you know.
I think we
That
need
makes sense.
I think we need a bike crossover.
well, why don't we let Chris talk to the consulting engineers?
Okay.
You know, let's have them come back to us. At this point in time, we'll move on with what we have with respect to the budget.
Thanks.
Let's move on to sanitation. Monica.
Well, Chris sort of answered my question. Sorry, I was on the wrong page
That's all right.
earlier. But why wouldn't we put disaster debris removal in there? Just, do we always add it back in? I'm sorry if I can't.
No, there are many years when we go with nothing.
Okay.
So we just, if we have an issue, you know, then we do the cleanup. Sometimes we need to transfer money, sometimes we don't, but you know, that's really what we use the contingency
I was always kind of
for.
felt like that was the contingency fund.
Great, I appreciate you
The other
clarifying
piece,
that.
though, is many times we get reimbursed for this.
Sure.
So all we're seeing is the expenditure here. But
Yeah.
what we're not seeing is the FEMA contribution to this.
Well, the FEMA contribution,
It's on the revenue side.
it shows up on the revenue side.
I know, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. It shows on the revenue, but what we're seeing here includes it.
Yes. And we expect to get around $107,000 to $110,000 from FEMA, which is actually already shown in the projection.
In the budget, in the
Yeah.
Revenue page.
in the revenues.
No. So I'm trying not to go around myself here. If you recall, when we originally appropriated money from the fund balance to cover the repairs to the boardwalk and the debris. At that point, no declaration was made, and we weren't getting any revenue. So we took money from our fund balance to fund that. Now, in fact, in June, you're going to get a budget amendment that will essentially replace that money back into the fund balance, because the project work orders are done. We know allegedly in the next several months we're going to get that, we're going to get, I think the final total is right under $108,000. We're going to get that back, so.
And my point was that this million plus 45,000 expenditure includes that.
It includes the
The $100,000.
well, it doesn't include, not all 100,000 was that, but 49,000, 50,000 was.
50,000. So 50,000 of this is paid for by FEMA,
Correct,
and the rest of it is our money.
correct.
Okay.
And just so I follow the methodology of budgeting, just what it's a contract, so we know sort of what it is. So that's helpful if we know kind of what contractually we're doing, outside of any extraneous disaster cleanup. So that's what this budget is requesting, is basically what we know we're going to.
Yes, it's my estimate for, for
Regular.
commercial, residential solid waste and recycling.
Great.
When we do a park cleanup, does it land in here?
Yeah,
Or a town?
yeah, and what, usually that's a very minor cost. It's the cost of the 40 cubic yard container. So the rental of that, which is
Yeah.
minimal.
Anything else on sanitation? If not, let's move on to beach protection. Any questions there?
No, I think all the volunteer work that went into it makes this look really good.
Oh, I was going to say, we're getting our money's worth in this line, in this
Yeah.
area.
Let's move on to community development.
And one thing I will say, the two major studies that we're working on, one the CAMA land use plan and the Western Carolina University piece. Since those are starting so late, we will be reappropriating what's unspent this fiscal year
Next year.
into next year.
They're on the professional services line, I assume?
Yes.
Oh, that's what, okay.
So that's indicated right now under current estimate. 2019
Yes.
estimate includes that money right now. And you're going to move it over.
The new year.
Yes, correct.
So you're going to shift X amount.
Yeah.
How much is X approximately?
I think we're probably going to be looking at a good 40,000 of that 65 ending up being reappropriated.
Anything additional in community development? If not, let's move on to parks. It's nice having that debt payment gone. That's right, we should have.
I'm always up for a party.
What's the events that are driving this?
I'm sorry.
We're having an increase in it under the miscellaneous events.
So those are the costs for all of the events we hold here, from Jazz Festival to the summer events, and the other items that we do. So differences in this, one of the items is we've added some variety shows, and the other fluctuations. Christian can probably answer that question, but my guess is it's also related to the number and/or the cost of certain performers. So just the combination of those.
It's also, as requested in surveys and from council, we added another full week of events in the summer, so there's an extra concert and some other activities. And one of the things that happens when we add events a little bit later in the year is that we begin to require lighting for stage performers, so that ups the cost a small amount.
From the feedback I get, it's definitely well worthwhile.
This is another budget area that will get set off by FEMA, correct, Chris? The repairs and maintenance of the boardwalk?
So those FEMA repairs are actually reflected in public buildings.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. But one thing I did want to point out is that 15,000 professional services, that is for the permitting and everything for the erosion project.
What's happening with that 300 we gave you?
So that 92,000 that we estimate for this year is not repairs of the piers and all that?
Rerouting of the line for the new electrical. Where did it end up?
We don't know yet. They're still working on that.
You haven't got it in your head?
No, that would have been under streets and highways, and the full amount is reflected in there. But we don't have a final bill yet.
For this year or for next year?
The current year.
Okay.
The 92,000 is getting partially offset though, right? I mean, we're only budgeting 25 for the coming year.
I missed the question, I'm sorry.
It's just on the 92, that was the pier and et cetera repairs, which FEMA will offset most of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you are correct. I'm sorry. Yes, you are correct. That is where we put that in. I apologize.
Right here under
Oh, it's here, right there.
repairs and maintenance.
Yeah, and so
Oh, okay, yeah.
so we're getting roughly 62,000 back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that's all right.
I was thinking of boardwalk repairs,
Yeah.
not
Just normal.
the storm repairs.
Let's move on to transfers to other funds. Pretty straightforward.
We transfer it out and we transfer it back in.
That's right. Well, we got the budgetary accounting.
You don't show anything for the renourishment.
What- Chuck, you got to speak into the mic, we're not hearing you.
I said I didn't see anything on the transfers on the renourishment in the outer years.
Yeah, there is. If you look at FY21, that is the money. That is money that's transferred out into the capital reserve fund.
For the beach nourishment?
Yes.
Okay, so this does include the renourishment?
Yes, the difference here is, so in FY 2020, this current year, you know, this is the last year at the current rate before we need to really talk about it. So next year, we're going to be talking about the MSD rates. The payments continue for another 2 years. So the money, so we're transferring money out, and more money is being transferred back in because there's still money that hasn't been expended that we've collected from the MSDs. The difference between the 471 and the 471 and the 653 and 675 is that the 675 and the 653 includes payment from the county that they agreed to. So the difference between those is what the county is giving us. And again, that 471 number is the estimate if based on, you know, when I went through that laborious exercise of showing the plan, this is based on that rate.
So that includes the MSD revenue for the renourishment?
This is the MSD revenue for that.
Plus the county is giving us the money when we're supposed to.
In 21 and 22, the county is giving us some money
Right.
out of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah. Of course they are.
Moving on to budgetary accounting, any question there?
And so you will see the fund balance, that number go up in the final, what I'm recommending for final after public hearing, and that's just because of the change in the streets and highways. The next is not required by ordinance, but I do try to do an estimated budget of, you know, for our capital reserve. And so, the revenues, the 1477608 is our debt service that goes out. And then the expenditures is what we're transferring into the general fund budget.
Which page?
50.
Oh. That's where I was.
The 1484 number includes, we've cost accounted out the cost of surveying, profile surveys in the nourishment area, and so we're using MSD revenue to pay for that portion. So that $1.484 million includes not only debt service but also money for that service. And then the other thing I would point out is that, you know, the estimated end of the year fund balance in the beach fund at the end of this year would be $2,014,000, $2,014,240. And you know, again, that's revenue. That's money that is that is going to be used to pay help pay the next 2 years of the debt. Yeah.
We're kind of ahead.
Yeah.
We're ahead a year.
Yeah. Don't get excited about that fund balance.
We're ahead 1 year, aren't we?
Basically. Yeah. Before we go to the next things, can I run to the restroom?
Go to break for 5 minutes?
Sure.
All right,
Thank you.
recess till 3.
It was something.
Okay, council is back in session. The next couple of items in here, the organization chart, the pay grades, the additional pay. Unless anyone has any questions for Chris, we'll skip those. Same with the MSDs. The only thing on the estimates and the forecast going out many years, Chris, you're going to evaluate and see where that 450 is floating around? You don't have to
And
do it right now, but
the answer is no, it's not reflected in there.
Okay,
So,
all right.
so that, that won't have that won't reflect on on sort of the bottom line numbers in terms of the net change, but it will reflect on the percentages for fund balance. So I'll correct that. And
thank you. My suggestion is we have the project cost summary and the general fund impact summary. We've gone through the capital plan many times. My suggestion is you look first at the project cost summary. If there's any item there that you wish to discuss, bring it up now. These are very familiar sheets, and I think we've all seen these before.
I just had one question, just because I couldn't figure it out, but I'm sure everybody else did.
Which page are you on?
On page 4, under the police vehicles, page 4. Oh, we're on the capital improvements
Project cost
page.
summary.
Keep going back. I'm sorry, we got past all that. Yeah. A little bit, page 4. I want to get Chuck to catch up. I just wasn't following the bump in the, on fiscal year 2022 with the, is that just, I think that's where my question laid. I didn't mark it, but the bottom line is that this is the idea that every 2 or 3 years we're, replacing I get that part, but maybe it wasn't that page, but there was a page where it seemed like it just didn't flow right. But is that what that's reflecting, that every other year, essentially, we're paying about $147,800 to do the,
So,
to do the
so
replacements?
this year would be 3 vehicles. Next year, no replacement of vehicles. 22, 3 vehicles.
3.
23, 1 vehicle, and we would pay that cash.
Got it.
24, 3 vehicles.
Right.
Thank you.
How many do we have total?
12, 13. 1. Yeah.
I'm talking all town vehicles.
Oh,
So 15, 16, 18 vehicles.
We got 18. So if we should be averaging between 2 and 3 a year replacement.
Yeah, and that's roughly what we average.
Does that make sense?
yeah, that was really clear when I looked at it
Any
the
other
second
questions
time.
on the project cost summaries or any particular item? If not, go to the general fund impact, which is basically expenditures. We're about halfway through on the construction of the town hall and property purchase, Chris, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And you'll see in FY24 FY23 is when we pay off the property, and FY24 is when we begin continuing paying for the town hall. And so there's 24 and 25, or FY25, FY26 are the last 2 payments. So FY26 is when this whole thing's paid off.
Will those radios ever get less expensive?
And
No, they get more expensive. They discontinue the cheap ones and they just continue to build the expensive ones.
On page
what is the?
7,
Oh, okay.
replacement of engine 111, is that right? It's 111, not 11? Yes. 111. Okay.
put you on the fire department soon.
I know, yeah, I know. Brain cells dying.
Well, you've got truck 11,
Well, yeah, I just was,
and then there's utility 11. This is so
You're
helpful.
figuring we're going to spend
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
how much a year on the public safety building replacement? 600,000?
Yeah, debt service somewhere in that range.
Figuring about a 10-year loan.
Yeah. It'll probably be 15, but
Any questions at all on general fund impact on capitals?
No, not for this year. I mean, I really appreciate the effort that goes into this. Thank you. Just thinking about next year.
It really brings us to the conclusion of the discussion on the budget. Any additional questions for Chris or staff before we look for a motion to go to public hearing?
I move we go to public hearing.
There's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. I'll remind council that our next meeting will be the regular meeting on Wednesday, June 5th, 2019 at 7 p.m. And obviously we'll now include the public hearing for the budget. And with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. The meeting is adjourned.
Very good budget.
thank you.
Very good job.
Thank you.